There's something stirring in the Force. Do you feel it? It's a sensation many of us have forgotten over the last few dreary years. It's not hope. No, it's too early for that, not yet. But there is a trickle of excitement that maybe, yes maybe, you'll get that rush you used to get whenever you saw something new from the Star Wars universe. Could we finally be back? In the last few years, Disney, in its pursuit of dominating all of our childhood dreams and fantasy, has done to Star Wars what it did to Marvel. They made too much content, and more importantly, the content that they did come out with was all pretty average, which is unacceptable for Star Wars.
Oh! What the hell?
Sure, a lot of it was passable, especially to hardcore Star Wars fans like me who are always interested in having all of our lore questions answered, like, what does the inside of a Sarlacc pit look like? Or, are there more of Yoda's species left in the galaxy? Now, it's easy to fill in lore. It's called fan servicing. Anyone can do it. You don't really need that much creative talent. But the reality is, in the last few years, there haven't been that many truly great entries into the Star Wars franchise. What we've gotten instead were Disney-fied shows that were fun and cute, but because of the collaborative process they use in these massive corporate-funded studio ventures and the wide audience that Disney's always trying to reach, the finished products have always been very uninspiring. One of the big problems during the post-sequel era, in my opinion, is the studio's reliance on one individual, Dave Filoni. I don't hate Dave. I think his Clone Wars is one of the best pieces of lore in Star Wars history. I even enjoyed Rebels to a certain extent, and The Bad Batch in the 7th season of the Clone Wars showed us how much he's come along since those early days when he was getting mentored by George Lucas. His leap to live action was also quite successful with the release of The Mandalorian, but I would argue that was due more to Jon Favreau's presence. You know, the individual who basically saved Marvel and launched the MCU single-handedly with his massively successful Iron Man trilogy. Jon Favreau's understanding of what comic book nerds want in their superheroes is legendary. His fingerprints are all over The Mandalorian. It's chock full of over-the-top action mixed with a good amount of self-depreciating humor to keep our protagonist balanced and likable, unlike that psychopath Superman. The Mandalorian is anything but perfect, and he's constantly getting messed up, and that's what really disarms us. Plus, no one can really hate on a guy who gets punched in the face so many times while protecting a baby Yoda. So when you mix Filoni and Jon Favreau, what you get is really good Star Wars lore mixed with a lot of fun, which is why The Mandalorian, at best, can only be a 7 or 8 out of 10 in my opinion. And that's because for art to truly work, it can't just entertain. There needs to be something a bit more serious about it, a focused theme, a heavy weight that actually moves the individual watching it. And if we're looking for these kind of things, then, well, maybe these two very talented goofballs might not be the answer. I mean, that is what Star Wars has been lacking for so long. I mean, yes, the new trilogy promised to showcase some really powerful themes and storylines, especially at the end of The Force Awakens. But having Rian Johnson hop into the director's seat in Episode 8, and then J.J. Abrams hop into the director's seat at the last minute in Episode 9 really kind of made the whole series feel disjointed. And so when it comes to strong and focused storytelling with strong thematic statements, the only Disney-era content that fits that description would be Rogue One. It's actually one of the few Star Wars films during this era that's been universally loved by both the critics and the audiences. And if you think about it, the story of Rogue One should have been really inconsequential from a lore standpoint. It's literally a movie that expands on a tiny part of the original Star Wars film, the Death Star plans. But maybe that's why the movie succeeded. It featured mostly new characters who had no lore or fan following, and therefore the writers and creators had no limitations in how they wanted to develop their story.
Oh, it's beautiful.
And Rogue One presented something quite new to the franchise, this concept that main characters can actually die. It showed us a Star Wars without the Force and elite characters who can fly into the Death Star and blow it up with a tiny X-Wing and escape unscathed. Instead, Rogue One just showed us a group of normal people from very different backgrounds making tremendous sacrifices for a shared cause. None of these individuals had superpowers or were even that capable on their own, and so there was always a sense of vulnerability and impending doom surrounding this entire film. And that's because Rogue One is really the only Star Wars film to actually be about war. The film's main themes are service, sacrifice, death, and more death, and of course a reminder that everyone can die. At the time, Rogue One was an extremely lucid look at what the Star Wars universe was actually like to live in. Once you're removed from the epic duels and fantastic space battles going on in orbit, all there's left to Star Wars is terrible suffering that the average living being in the galaxy has to endure. And I was so disappointed that they didn't build on this viewpoint of Star Wars more, and I'm really excited that now they're bringing it back. If you think about it, in Star Wars, massively tragic events are constantly being brushed aside or just punctuated by a gasp from a princess or a headache from an old wizard who can sense death across the cosmos. I guess in a story where an entire planet is destroyed in the first act and an entire space station full of 1 million people gets blown up in the second half, there's probably not that much time to dwell on loss. Which is kind of strange, isn't it? I mean, aren't we becoming completely desensitized to the importance of human life in these movies? I know movies have a short running time, but doesn't it cheapen the overall larger meaning of the Star Wars universe? That's probably why novels have always been seen as a higher form of art, simply because writers have more time to delve into the nuances and experiences the characters are going through in those delicious pages they're writing on. I mean, that for me is the beauty of a movie like Rogue One. Star Wars has gotten large enough where there's enough following that fans can pay respect to such a small detail in a larger galactic story. This allows fans to feel sad and mourn the loss of relatively inconsequential characters in Star Wars history, in the same way that we mourned larger figures like Qui-Gon Jinn or Obi-Wan Kenobi or even Darth Vader. After the Rogue One movie, I almost wanted to see a short film that followed a family on Alderaan on the day of their destruction, so that we can live and feel that moment happening, so that it becomes more than just an event on the galactic timeline. Which brings me to my next question. I mean, what is Star Wars actually about? It's so many different things to so many different people. For me, it's about escapism to a certain degree. I'm always seeking new adventures and new things. That's always been important to me and why I really like the sci-fi fantasy genre. It's all about fun and entertainment, and there's really nothing wrong with Star Wars being fun and entertaining, but I've always wished that Star Wars could return back to its roots of having a deeper meaning. In the original and prequel trilogy, there was always something there that was built into the story by the creator George Lucas himself. There was always this idea that surrounded how great political upheaval could affect the individual and how important the choices individuals make are to the wider galaxy. Star Wars always tried to awaken the audiences to the realities of their own world through these very fantastical worlds. It was almost like a smelling salt to get us out of our funk. In the prequels, we see the inevitable slide of the galaxy and the Republic and its heroes towards the darkness of tyranny and empire. The prequels were always a warning about how a democracy is susceptible to failure if the guardians of it are not vigilant and let their fears and emotions cloud their judgment and send them running directly into the laps of despots. In the original trilogy, we see the opposite, a spark of hope and decency that is inextinguishable because of the willingness of individuals to add to the fire by sacrificing everything they have, including even their lives. It's an equally important lesson for audiences to learn, especially those who grew up in an unprecedented time of peace and stability and never seen what the cruel reality of living under oppression and dictatorship is like. The sad truth is not everyone is aware of the history of our cruel world. This lack of intimacy of humanity's greatest crimes is why we continue to repeat the same mistakes over and over again. And so to reach those individuals who are somewhat unaware and blind to reality, sometimes important life lessons must be hidden in the form of entertainment so that when the time comes for them to make a choice on what trajectory their life takes, they might have some type of instruction or example to follow, even if it's completely fictional. In 2014, when Hong Kong students rallied against China's attempt to destroy their city's autonomy, choruses of "Do You Hear the People Sing" could be heard from the tops of the barricades. In that same year in Thailand, student protesters took to the streets and rallied against their military, which was attempting to overthrow the government for the 12th time in a century. The students adopted a three-finger salute as the symbol of their movement. This came straight from the Hunger Games franchise. Those who laugh at the idea of kids using fictional symbols and songs as a rallying call for the revolution do not understand the power of symbols. And I believe Star Wars used to also be a franchise that inspired people to do the right things. This is what excites me about the Andor TV series coming up. There's something very different about how the show is being presented. For one, it's not being developed by Dave Filoni. I've seen Rebels, I've seen what he's capable of doing in the original trilogy era, and I don't think he's the right type of creator for this period of time. Instead, it's going to be the Rogue One team that will be directing and creating this series. Tony Gilroy, the writer of the Bourne series and the co-writer of Rogue One, who also came out as a director in the 11th Hour and finalized the last cut of the movie, will be in charge. This has really gotten me excited, and I'm sensing that the tone that Andor is trying to set will be very different from any other Star Wars series we've seen so far aside from Rogue One. A quick look at the trailers that have come out so far for Andor shows us that there won't be much flash, there won't be anything cute, no one even smiles because there's really nothing to smile about when you're being oppressed. This obviously is not going to be a TV series about magical wizards wielding lightsabers and deciding the fate of the galaxy through a duel. This won't be a series about a warrior who wears armor that makes him invincible. This will be a story about death and suffering and the consequences of being a poorly armed rebel going up against a military dictatorship. And I suspect this time around, when the rebels are surrounded by Imperials, there won't be cute little alien bears coming to the rescue. We'll only see the aftermath, mangled bodies holding on to each other, which is the result of what happens when you get overrun by heavy weapons. And it's about time we see more of this in Star Wars. There is no glory to be found in war. Only terribly powerful weapons and the horror of seeing what they can do to the human body. And oftentimes, those who die heroic deaths are not even remembered. More often than not, they're forgotten because of the sheer quantity of suffering that happens in these type of conflicts. So there you have it, guys. That is my preview of the Andor series. Let me know in the comment section below what you think about my analysis. Also, don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification button down below so you don't miss out on the rest of our coverage. As usual, my name is Alan, reminding you that my allegiance is to the Republic, to democracy.